Hello everyone, I'm Chris O'Hara back for another guitar YouTube video, and today I have a special treat for you. Recently I was able to sit down with my good friend Mark Brown, who owns a guitar repair shop here in San Jose, California, and I got to kind of pick his brain about what he does and the kinds of work that he offers, from repairing guitars to setups to doing upgrades like pickups, bridges, you name it. He's pretty much can do anything on the guitar, and he's got a lot of insight. He's literally worked on thousands of guitars over the years. He was a guitar tech for the Doobie Brothers for many years, and he's got a lot of experience. It's an art form what he does, and I can't say enough good things about him, as well as other people like him who've spent majority of their life doing what they do. And so hopefully this interview you'll be able to get some good information from him and get a good insight about what he does. There's a great little story in the end about an SG he brought back from the dead, so hopefully you'll enjoy that. I will leave all his contact information below in the description, so if you want to reach out to him, he's a great guy to talk to about getting work done on your guitar, or if you just have some general questions, he's pretty open to that. The first segment I did, one of the video files got messed up, so that I only have the side angle, but then towards the middle and the end, both cameras are working, so you'll be able to get a good view of this interview. So hopefully enjoy it. And I think is there anything else? I think that's it. So without further ado, here's the Mark Brown interview. Thanks for watching. Hello everyone, I'm Chris O'Hara, and I'm here with my good friend Mark Brown at Mark's Guitar, and I thought I'd spend a little time get a chance to interview Mark, and he can talk about kind of what he does best. He's a guitar repair man, and he's like a guy with many talents, and I thought I'd give him a chance to kind of talk about what he can do for guitars, and especially your guitar if you're in the San Jose area. But let's start off with a little bit of talking about his background. First of all, how did you get involved with working on guitars?
Funny story. I got hired with the Doobie Brothers in 1972, and I guess I've always been interested in guitars. I had played some up to that point, but they hired me to lift all their luggage and just be this grunt, this guy on the road shoveling stuff in and out of airplanes and wherever they had to do it. And one day they didn't show up for a sound check, so I took it upon myself to tune all the guitars. There was tons of different tunings, and so I had written them all down before just because I wanted to anyway, so I did all that. Then after the band got there, and everything was tuned and ready to go, and all the amps were ready. After that, they didn't want to do much of that. They wanted to, it made it easier for me. Bottom line is because I didn't have to wait for them to do it.
Yeah.
So I did it way before they got there, and then they just showed up, ate, and went to work.
Yeah.
And they were much happier when they hit the stage, and all of a sudden I just, I don't know what it is. Sometimes you just kind of feel you found something that you could really do and it feels right. That was it.
Yeah.
Working on guitars at that point started that day.
Yeah.
It really helped.
And that was probably a good time because guitars were just it was really popular instrument back then.
Yeah, well, you know, they didn't, back in 1972, the sound systems weren't near as intricate as they do today. And all of the guitar playing was done, you know, stage volume coming off. So the sound coming from the stage was horribly important. And so the problems and the solutions to do that were just immense, really.
Yeah.
Much harder than they are now. You can get any kind of amp and have it be well done now, but that's not the case back then.
Yeah.
And all these halls and monitor systems weren't good. You know, it really put a lot of pressure on the band.
Yeah.
And I got to say that that's a a huge difference from then until now.
Yeah.
Most of the guitars that you played then are the same now, but the workings of them, everything's gotten so technical, and all of the effects and everything else have changed so much. But still, it's still the guitar.
Yeah.
No matter how much stuff that we buy, or do, it's all still the guitar.
Comes down to that. So how did you, so you started, getting the guitars in tune for the Doobie Brothers and doing some setups and some work. How did you learn how to do that back then?
Oh, it was my only gift to the world and myself, I guess, is I'm mechanically inclined.
Mm-hmm.
I can pick up something and look at it and instantly almost figure out how to put it back together.
Yeah.
And guitars really aren't that complicated, but the geometry to them is.
Mm-hmm.
That took a little while for me to deal with. But in the process of doing that, it went on the fast track because all these guitars were getting really hot every day.
Mm-hmm.
Then they'd get really cold.
Mm-hmm.
And then, that in itself probably was maybe 3 years of some kind of technical school.
Yeah.
Right there.
Right.
1 year of that would either drive you nuts or you'd be able to figure it out.
Yeah.
When stage lights happen, the guitars turn from okay to just mush.
Right. And is that mostly because the temperature are constantly
Yeah,
changing?
I mean, Pat Simmons played a 335, and that was a really, really nice guitars. But stage temperature was a problem, and humidity and all of that.
Yeah.
But I was able to get by those things, fix them every day. On the second tour I did like that was just a little bit better, and so on.
Yeah.
Pretty soon though, I was in charge of 30-something guitars. That I had to fix every day. So once I started doing it, I didn't stop until the night was over.
Yeah.
I just have to eat and keep going.
Yeah.
No complaints, just that's the way it was.
So how did you transition from working with the Doobie Brothers to doing kind of where you're at right now as far as your own business?
Well, the Doobie Brothers kind of gave their farewell tour in the early 80s. And I tried to get other jobs, but it was always you drive this truck across the United States and then set up the gear and then get back in the truck and drive back. And I thought, well, why do I want to do that? And the Doobie Brothers had a profit sharing program to where I was there and they, saved money for me.
Mm-hmm.
So when I got off the road, I really worked hard in my garage, selling guitars, going to different music stores, and finally got a job at one in West LA,
Mm-hmm.
Westwood Music. And there again, I learned even a ton more. And I was refinishing guitars, building them, and that's kind of how I got to where I am now, is through their Doobie Brothers program of their profit sharing, because I couldn't have done it otherwise. I would have had to been on that, driving that truck across the United States, just, not being very happy. And so now what has happened is I was down in Los Angeles, and I kept doing that for several years, and then finally my wife and I moved to Northern California, back home for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked for some other stores around here, and finally I was doing work for everybody, so I thought, why don't I just have my own shop and everybody can bring me stuff? And so that worked out fine. And to do that, the Doobie Brothers asked me in 94, 92, go out on the road again. And so that's why I opened up this place in 94. They just made it too easy.
Yeah.
They just really took care of me.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right, now I'd like to maybe have Mark talk a little bit about the kinds of services that he offers and things that he can do that maybe you're even not aware about, or maybe you are aware about. So,
well, primarily I've been doing setups and fret mills, and that takes care of a fair amount of what I do. But I also do finish touch-ups and work on acoustic guitars, bracing problems that tend to fall or break on most all of them. I spend a lot of time with electronics, repairing some pickups, replacing a lot, and there's also the bottom line though is sometimes the customer will come in and come up with something that I usually don't do. I'm accommodating in that way. Most of the time I can come across with a violin problem or a banjo problem, and do that. So I'm kind of open to that. But the primary, what keeps these guitars going for most of the community is the setups, the fret mills, the refrets. I do a ton of those, and finishing, little finishing problems tends to be the majority of things I do.
So how often does a guitar need to get, like, say, refretted? Something that
Well, that's funny. You know, like on the modern refrets that I see coming from the factories, they tend to be pretty good, but they're using softer frets. And when that happens is that when the frets wear out, they can do it in such a way that they leave little craters in the frets. And when that starts happening is tuning starts to go, and then sound quality. And so that's a fairly big issue.
Yeah.
And so how long that takes is approximately, you know, anywhere from 6 months to a year. Then fret mills can totally solve a ton of problems if you catch them early. And then that way, instead of replacing all the frets, they can be re-rounded and dressed and be made to be much better for about half the cost.
Yeah. I know Mark he's done all the work on all my guitars, and I remember, I'll tell a quick little story. I remember how I met Mark. I don't know if you remember, I had my George Benson.
Oh, right. I remember that guitar.
Yeah. And before I met Mark, I was taking it to all these different people to see if they would fix it, and they were like, "No, well, you might as well use that guitar as parts." And I almost got to the end of the rope with that guitar, and was thinking about selling it. And I forget, someone may have like recommended, "Oh, you should try Mark's guitar." So I came in here, and this is like, I was literally thinking that nothing could be done with this guitar, and I brought it in, and Mark's like, "Oh yeah, we can fix it." He's like, "It needs a refret, but we can fix it." And I was like blown away, because everyone else was telling me, "Oh, we can't work on this. There's nothing we can do." And when I got the guitar back, I literally thought that he gave me a different guitar. I mean, this thing, I went from like being really frustrated with playing this thing to, I mean, it was like a brand new guitar for me, and it sounded better, it played better, and yeah, I was sold from that day on. And I'm always, from the work that Mark's done, I've always realized how important the setup and the frets and it is to the sound, the tone, and the playability of the guitar.
Yeah, it's paramount, really.
Yeah.
You know, the frets, you know, you don't really think about it too much. I mean, until you know, over a gradual, these things happen gradually, so we don't really aren't that attentive to it. And then all of a sudden you just go, God, you know what? I think I need new pickups in my guitar.
Right.
But you know, a large part of the time, it doesn't have anything to do with the pickups. It has everything to do with the setup and the rounding of the frets. Yeah. Once you can hear it, any chord, and it's in tune, it makes the pickup sound at least 20% better. And that's all you're going to get if you change pickups. So it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. So maybe let's talk a little bit about, as most people know, the main types of guitars are there, like Fender, there's Gibson, and you know, there's a few others. But I would say we could focus on maybe Fender and Gibson, because they're the most common kind of brands out there. So maybe, Mark, if you could talk a little bit about maybe either some common things or some things that are, you know, kind of problematic with either one of those instruments. Yeah.
Fenders, for example, are almost the hardest guitar. Strats in general are some of the hardest things to work on, because the pickups in them, where they're placed, if the pickup is too high, then it's going to make the strings vibrate at a very weird, it almost makes it sound like a helicopter. It's a very terrible sound. And the frets and the fretboard, if they're not perfect or close to it, a lot of times they'll be very tough to play, though they're incredibly popular, and they're popular for a reason, because they're just a great guitar with a great sound. But you know, they need more attention, and once you give them that attention, they can be fine playing guitars for years.
Yeah. Is there any sort of problematic with the bridge on the Fenders, like because it's a tremolo? Is that?
Yeah, the problem. Well, you know, it was designed so long ago. They really, in the end, don't work that well unless you, you know, have it slightly floating. And the bottom line, though, is you have to be using a tremolo anyway.
Yeah.
Because if you just start with a Strat tremolo, and it's not going to stay in tune very well.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you have to. There's a learning curve for the player as well as the guy working on it.
Yeah.
And to match up with the player is horribly important for me anyway. I mean, you know, how is he going to use the tremolo? What music is he going to play on it? And then I can kind of adjust it to that. But they are a problem because the saddles have 2 screws to raise and lower them usually, and they just tend to fall and they get or corroded in the wrong spot, and then the action goes. So that's always something to look at. You know, always keep clean and adjusted.
Yeah.
Is there, are Fenders typically more sensitive to string gauge change? So if you're going from, let's say, a tens to a because of the tension of the strings on the Fender?
Yeah, because of the tremolo. If you have a tremolo set for 1 gauge of string and you put on another gauge, that's just going to screw everything up. And if you look at your guitar and you see that the tremolo back end of it is flipped up, then that's a sign that you should take it somewhere and get it worked on, because it shouldn't be up that high. The intonation, the action, it's just not going to sound very well. And once you get that fixed, it's going to be a different guitar for sure.
Yeah. What about tellies? Is tellies much easier?
Well, sometimes, but here again, it's all about the pickups. They tend to be a little buzzier, but the player, after you get used to playing one, then you go, wow, why didn't I do this before? But there is a bit of a learning curve with Telecasters because of the way they are and the way the pickup is placed and the way you're picking at it.
Yeah.
If you, let's say if you're a strummer and you have it on the bridge pickup and you're strumming, making chords, it's really not, it's going to sound pretty high-endy and not distorted by any means, but maybe not the most pleasant sound.
Yeah.
Having the pickup selector switch in the right area when playing it in that way will make a huge difference.
Yeah.
For sure.
What about Gibson? What's anything problematic?
Yeah. With Gibsons, people tend to. I've seen this a lot of used guitars. The R9s, for example, the higher end Les Pauls, they're made from mahogany necks, and so they tend to warp. And because they soak up, the mahogany is an open grain wood, and they have a tendency to break. The necks. I've fixed more Gibson necks that snap off. Just the headstocks snap off, and they're just. Crazy things like maybe you have it in your hand, you turn, you hit a door jamb, and then snap. Or if it's in a soft case and the case falls, that's a problem. But they have such an incredible sound, regardless if it's an R9. I mention that only because they're really made with the older construction, and sometimes they're more susceptible to that. But all Les Pauls in general, or Gibsons in general, have that same issue. But on the other hand, once they're set up right, with the pickups at the right height, using all of the fret milling, refretting, and getting them absolutely right, they really sound great. The fretboards are much easier to bend strings on. Fenders, on the other hand, have more of a radius on it, so sometimes it might kind of feel like you're bending the strings and kind of going uphill, which is fine if that's what you're used to. But the Gibsons don't have that, and you can always get the action a little bit lower on Gibsons than you can on Fenders because of the pickup issues aren't quite as bad. So all in all, the Gibsons have been, they can take it. Yeah. Except for the neck problems, and a lot of people tend to overlook the actual bridge mechanism. The strings are there's a lot of tension on these strings, and the bridge on a Gibson's got with 2 posts, and so they tend to sag in the middle. So the D and the G string can actually be lowered to the fretboard than the 2 outer E's, and that causes a lot of problem. And it took me a long time to figure that out. And I just looked at one day, you know, this is years and years ago. I just went, oh my God. So I just turned it over and hit it with a hammer. It was an experiment. But then I just put it back on the guitar and I went, oh wow, what a difference.
Yeah.
So I sell more bridges, believe me, because of that.
Because of that,
Yeah, that's really a key problem.
Good.
All right, so now I'd like to ask Mark about tone. Most guitar players are obsessive about tone, and I know Mark deals with that literally on a daily basis about people wanting to get the right tone, improving their tone, and I think Mark has a lot of insight on that, and so let's talk about that.
I see a fair amount of people all year, and almost everybody that comes in the shop wants to improve the tone, which is natural. I mean, that's the whole point of getting your guitar repaired. And so, you know, they always say, well, I'm going to buy these pickups, and then I just have to put my hand up and say, well, you know, you ought to hold on to that first. The tone, nowadays, when you buy a guitar, most of the pickups that come with these guitars are pretty decent. You know, they all have their problems, but they're fairly decent. And so the problem I came across is all the people that brought in their guitars for new pickups, not all of them, but most of them, all the setup was bad. All of the frets were hammered. The action was a ray. The pickups were misadjusted. Bad volume pots or tone pots. And so, you know, I could, you know, obviously make more money by selling pickups, but in the end, it's all about the tone, not about selling pickups. So I started years ago really adjusting these things, and it makes a difference on tone. If you can hit chords on guitars and have them play in tune, the tone raises. You know, it can go up about 20%. If you play a guitar and it almost is in tune, but not quite, it'll sound flat.
Yeah.
And then everybody says, well, you know, and it does. You know, it does. It sounds flat. But the problem is the guitar just isn't set up. And some of the time, you know, somebody will leave a set of strings on for a good amount of time, and that's really not conducive. When I was on the road with the Doobie Brothers, we changed the strings every hour and a half.
Wow.
And that made the difference in an audible difference in the shows that I heard of.
I mean, that's such a critical part of the guitar is the string, right?
Yeah, and when they're put on the guitar and put on properly without too many whines and done properly, it makes a huge difference on tone along with the setup, because when you set up a guitar, they're set up with a new set of strings. So if that string gets stretched, then we're back at the problem with, you know, my pickups just don't sound right. And a lot of times it isn't the pickup, it's everything that I just mentioned. And when it is the pickup, and they're looking, if a customer comes in looking for a specific sound that obviously their guitar can't deliver, then it's time to get them a pickup.
Yeah.
I mean, I've noticed a difference from having my guitar set up with Mark, and the tonal change to it is dramatic. And he hasn't even changed the pickups, nothing. I mean, it was just a setup, or he did a fret mill, and I'm just amazed. And it's like what Mark says. I think getting the guitar in tune is a big part of it.
Yeah, and you know what? It's a whole lot cheaper.
Exactly.
Bar none. It's way cheaper.
Yeah. And I've had that same experience. I'm like, well, maybe I'll change the pickups or something, but I'm always like, well, let me just have Mark take a look at it first, and without fail, I get the guitar back. I'm like, it's fine. It just needed a setup and have some work done to it. So
yeah, they're also, you know, over a period of time, you know, in Gibson guitars, sometimes the pickups can get unscrewed and they can start falling, and so it happens with all guitars. But I notice that more with the Gibsons. But all guitars, you know, if the pickups stay adjusted to player's playing style, then things tend to sound good for a long time.
Yeah, yeah. So even though after what Mark talked about, let's as far as getting the setup and then getting the guitar in tune and everything, what kind of pickups and things do you recommend people if they were to go the upgrade route?
Well, like say if you were wanting to buy new pickups, then I think some of the best on the market is Lindy Fralin handmade, hand-wound pickups. They do a consistently great job in winding these things and making them as good as they can be. And also Seymour Duncan, here again, does a great job. I primarily use those two pickup manufacturers because of the consistency. Mm-hmm. And I don't have any problems. And either does the client. There's a ton of other pickups out there, and some of them cost a huge amount of money. And you just got to ask yourself where you're gaining the tone at that point. Yeah. You're not buying the brand more than you're buying the tone.
Yeah.
And here again, I wouldn't suggest buying any of those super high-end pickups until your guitar was totally up to snuff, because you put in something that's could be fairly expensive and it could sound fairly weird. Yeah. But those are the two brands I generally use. And you can call up and talk to Lindy Fralin and ask them about a certain problem you're having with a guitar, and they can come up with a solution almost all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a customer service and also product development that doesn't really happen now.
Yeah, and you've been working with Lindy Fralin for a long time, or ordering pickups from him for a long time.
Yeah, he's really really adaptable. I mean, he's just not just, this is the pickup I sell. Mm-hmm. Too bad. He'll go, if we put some more windings on this, you could get just a little bit more grunt. Mm-hmm. And do this and do that. It really makes a little difference. 5%. If you have a guitar and you increase it by 5%, mm-hmm. that doesn't sound like very much, but in the end, it's huge, because you add a new set of pickups and setup, and 5% of this and 2% of that makes a big difference.
Yeah, those little tweaks.
Yeah,
I think it's important to to think about everything. There's all those little components in the chain have to be in line until we get to the pickups, in a sense. So getting back to getting the setup, getting everything in perfect condition,
right?
And then it's like, all right, let's talk about pickups. But even I think sometimes even when it gets into electronics, I know from my experience, even the amp has to be the right amp, because if you change the pickups, maybe you're thinking that's going to get you there, but maybe you really need a different amp sometimes.
Yeah, totally.
So amps and guitars, and we were just talking about how kind of closely integrated they need to be, and Mark was mentioning the quality hand-wound amplifiers. Yeah,
I've seen so many of the like Fender has what looks to be a vintage amp, but in essence it's just an amp full of circuit boards, and they sound okay, but they certainly don't sound like a real tube amp sounds.
Yeah.
And that seems to be what everybody's looking for, that edge, that sound. And it really makes a huge difference if you can get your hands on an older Fender amp or a modern version of that amp.
Yeah.
There's so many of them available, but that truly is a big deal. Some of the solid state amps can be great for practicing because they're clear, crisp, mm-hmm. and clean. So when sitting on the couch and you're practicing, that makes another huge difference. That's almost better than a tube amp.
Yeah, and I've always found sometimes the better amps are at first they may sound bad, but it's almost, I sometimes relate equipment to like cars. Like if you were to jump into a Ferrari for the first time, you'd probably run yourself into a tree, even though it's so high performance, it's well tuned.
Right.
And same thing I think with amps and guitars. Like the first time you play, it's like it's just it's hard to work with it until you practice with that guitar and amp, and then you really learn how to, in a sense, drive that equipment.
Right. Big difference.
Big difference, because they respond. I noticed from my experience with these, especially the hand wound or the hand wire tube amps, is that they're very responsive, and it took me a long time to figure out how to actually play that particular
how to
amp.
use it.
Yeah, how to use it.
Yeah, it's a problem, but it's not a big problem.
Yeah.
It can be overcome with a couple jam sessions, and that will start to lighten things up right away.
Yeah. I find majority of, and for me, it's a lot in the players, you may imagine, but I think it's easy to sometimes blame the gear when you're not getting the right tone.
Oh, always.
And so one thing that I think is important, something I always tell my students is, like, get that part of the equation out. Like, get your guitar set up, get them playing right, get them in tune, and get a decent amp, and then the rest is really kind of up to you to practice, right?
Oh yeah. It's really important, I mean, I can only take a guitar so far. Then everybody else has to take it that last, like I said before, 2 or 3%.
Yeah.
It makes all the difference in the world by just getting used to playing on an amp, regardless if it's solid state or tube. It just your touch changes. Your whole the way you hold the guitar changes. It all changes, and it makes it for a much better job for sure.
Experience, yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about maybe some top guitars that either you've worked on or that you've seen that you've liked. And
oh yeah, I've worked on a ton of them. Bar none, some of my favorite guitars are the R9 Les Pauls. But they're not all of them. It's very scattered. It's like 1 out of 10 will be this great sounding guitar, and the rest of them will kind of be okay.
Yeah.
And they really can rip. It's amazing. If you get a Les Paul and the neck pickup is muddy, sometimes you can change out the pickup and make it better, but sometimes you can't.
Yeah.
I've seen them, 15 or 20 pickups in there or whatever, and it's still the same problem. So there's something happening with the wood, and all the neck joints and everything you've probably heard is true, in that that makes a difference, and it certainly does. The other guitars, obviously, I love Strats and Tellies. They tend to be those three guitars are the absolute workhorses of the entire music industry.
Yeah.
All the sessions that I've done have all been centered around that design.
Yeah.
All of them. I mean, it's amazing how much that has dictated everything that we hear today.
Yeah.
And obviously, not to say that Jackson and all these other guitars haven't played their role, but they wouldn't have been around if it hadn't been for Telecasters and Gibsons anyway. Yeah. They started it. That was it. And everybody seems to be going back to that. And it's kind of cool because those designs, out of anything that that we buy today, our cars don't last 2 or 3 years, but the same designs are going on now. 60-something years?
It's amazing, huh?
70 years?
Yeah.
And they're still going. Wow, how can I make it sound like it did?
Right.
Nobody. I mean, how you don't want to come in and say, how can I make my car run like it did 60 years ago?
Right.
Nobody's doing that.
You may not want that.
Yeah.
Right? So tell me a little about this SG that you
well, in 1972, 73, Tommy Johnston had this SG that was his first guitar when the Doobie Brothers got an album contract, and it got broke in the tuning room. It fell over and smashed, and he was like, he had this thing in his hand. It was just like holding his kid. I mean, he was damn near in tears. He goes, "Take it away. I never want to see it again." So, being the guy I am, I took it away, and he's right. He never did see it. I kept that guitar for 40 years. I kept it all this time because I couldn't find a proper neck. And, I'd find a neck, and then, time would go by. Then the earthquake happened in '89, I guess, and then the guitar got broke again. So I had to fix it again and again and again. And then finally, about a year and a half ago, I finished it, you know, and I called him up. I said, hey, by the way, you know, I got this guitar that was broken all these years ago, and I heard this, you know, like horribly dead silence, and he goes, you don't have that guitar. I said, you know, Tom, I do have it. I'm going to bring it up to you this weekend. And he goes, he was speechless. Yeah. And I brought it up to him, and he just looked at it, and he goes, my God, I haven't seen this since, I said, 1973 in Long Beach is when you last saw it. And he was, I'd never seen anybody, he was speechless. And, you know, and I didn't really, I just did it because I wanted to do it, and he's just a great guy. Yeah. I've known him forever, him and Pat. I would do anything for those guys. They've just been so nice to me. But it was nice to be able to keep something so many years. I mean, the pickups, the original pickups, they were in the earthquake, and they were in a plastic bag and got washed in a flood across the room. And they just it was just all this stuff happening to this poor guitar. And finally, when it got back together and it was playable again, and he got it back, and I told him the story, he was he was pretty amused. That's a pretty neat story, actually.
Yeah, that is great.
Yeah,
and I'm sure it sounds amazing now. Huh?
It does. It sounds really good. I've let a few people play it, and they've always gone, "Oh my God, this thing rips," you know. And it was a '60s SG, and I put on a '60s. Finally found a '60s neck, and it just made all the difference in the world. Now, I mean, it's a little tore up, but it's still got the original finish on it, because it's only original once. Right. You know, I didn't want to turn it into anything it wasn't. Yeah. All the battle scars and stuff. And now he won't take it out of the studio. Yeah. He's not.
It's amazing how, you know, an instrument can have so much sentimental value to it, and a lot of history, and that's why I always get upset when I hear instruments getting stolen from musicians.
Yeah, it's a horrible thing, and I've seen enough of that myself. It's a very personal item. You know, when you spend whatever time you spend playing it, it turns into something else rather than the guitar. It turns into a part of you. And when that part of you gets stolen, it's a part of you being stolen, not so much the guitar, but a part of you. It's hard to explain, but that's what I found out.
Yeah, you can't replace it, no. And that's
yeah.
I'd rather have somebody, you know, steal money from me than any of my guitars.
Yeah.
The money you can always replace, and
that's true.
Whatever, the guitar, it's like it's gone.
It's gone.
It's kind of like a kid, I guess. People always call it their baby, and there's a reason why. So let's, you know, Mark, where can people find you? He works. He's got a shop here in Campbell, California.
Yep.
Silicon Valley, and I know you got a Facebook page, right?
Yep. You can find. There's a little map on there in my Facebook, and also there's a story about the guitar I built for Tommy, and you'll see it. You'll see the guitar there, and other things I do here at the shop and have done. So that's a fairly informative place to go.
Okay, good. And tell me a little bit about this book project you're working on.
Oh yeah, during the starting of the Doobie Brothers, when I first started working for them, I started taking pictures, and lots of them. I got a ton of them during the earthquake. Unfortunately, I lost some, but I saved some, and I got a ton of stories. So I'm going to write a book. It's very close. I mean, it's to the point where I just have to find somebody to help me write it. But there's so much going on there. And people who have seen my pictures and stuff are interested for sure. And it just seems like rock and roll in general has been a never-ending story, meaning it just goes on. Yeah. And stories past are just as popular as stories now, or books now, vice versa. So I thought, well, why not? Not a lot of any books that I know of about the crew, about what happened to us, you know, and how we got
that time.
Yeah, and got around, which wasn't, you know, I mean, we flew around on a 1940s DC-3 World War II airplane. I mean, it was it was pretty hairy, you know. Which story is forthcoming, believe me.
Yeah.
But there you go.
I've seen some of the pictures, and even Mark's even told me some of the stories, and it's definitely going to be a good read.
Oh yeah, it'll be. If it won't laugh, it'll probably make you cry.
Thanks for watching this video, and I want to thank Mark for letting me interview him, and hopefully you found this very containing a lot of information, and I'm going to put all the links and how to contact Mark below. And yeah, there you go. Thanks a lot, Mark.
Thank you, buddy Chris.
All right.
We're whooping.
That's right. Take care. I'll see you everyone in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Bye.